In this video I will give you tips to level up in Notion. Let me guess, you've built a few Notion pages, but they feel clunky, slow you down, and there are things missing. Let's take your tasks as an example. You repeat default inputs, databases are not linked, and shortcuts nowhere to be found, and so much more. Until you fix this, you keep wasting potential and time every single day. These tips will show you how to improve the aesthetic of your workspace, unlock new features, streamline your workflow, and avoid common beginner mistakes that are detrimental. Apply them once and your workspace finally will run like a freshly oiled machine. You will be more focused, more efficient, and as a result get so much more done. And for those who don't know me, my name is Leon and I've spent well over 2000 hours in Notion, learning, experimenting, building things, also breaking and then rebuilding them. And here are tips to level up in Notion. In this chapter, first I want to show you how to increase the aesthetic of your workspace. So as you can see, I prepared a home view on the left side with everything included, and we want to rebuild this on the right side. Now the first thing that we can always do, because now we have limited space here, so we can go up here and put a page to full width. Then what we can do is we can split this page into different columns. So just write slash, and in this case 2 columns, and now we have different columns on a page. Then the next thing we can always do is, because I think there is a better way to show the name of a database, we can hide the database title. Then we can create our own database title and just write slash toggle and then select heading 3 to create a toggle heading 3, and then we can write tasks. What we can then do is we can select the task name and we can apply code formatting that will display it in this way. On top, we can also manipulate this in another way. We can underline it, then we can make it bold, and then we can change the color to white again. And now I think this looks very good. As I already showed you, you can change the color and you can do it in 2 ways. You can change the text color, for example, make this gray or brown or red, or I can also change the background color. I could say, for example, I want this in white, but I want a red background. And now we have white text on a red background. So you can go for every combination out of these options that you want. Now, if you want this to be smaller, so let's say we only have one view and we don't want to see the name, you can just go in here, select everything, then delete it and just write a space, go out, and you will only see this check, which is much more minimalistic. Now, the next thing we can do when we have a table view, so we have different views, board, timeline, calendar, but also table. In this, we can make the property smaller. So we can go in here, then we can see this getting blue, and we can shrink it. Same here and here. And now I did that for all the properties, so we don't need to scroll anymore. Then we can select custom icons for properties. For example, for time, I always like to go for this hourglass icon. So I can add this, and by seeing this, I know this is a relation to the time database. Could also say this for the assignee. I could always, for example, make this to the people icon, and then I will always do this in every database. So you can decide if you want this, and yes, if you want to do this, which icon. Now, the next thing that you can always do is you can create a so-called callout, which in my opinion adds something to the aesthetic. You can write slash and then callout, which will, let's remove this. You can always go for an icon or emoji here, but for now, let's remove this. You will get this thin border, and then we can drag our database view in here. Then what we can do again is we can either shrink this, or what we can do, we can decide which properties we want to see. For example, I don't want to see the created by property, so I can hide it. Same with created time and with our database relation. So now everything looks much better and we don't have to scroll. What we can also do is we can place emojis on the page itself. For example, I can go in front of here, press this double dot and then E, and this will give me access to the emojis. And I could, for example, add this thought balloon in front of here. And now I have an emoji in front of my title. What you can also do is you can write this again, and here you can add an emoji. So you can create a custom emoji, upload it here and place it on your site. Where you can also add emojis to make it look better is for your database pages. So you can go up here and you can add an icon or an emoji. For example, I could add this check mark icon. So now, because I always go for the check mark icon for tasks, it looks much better than without it. So now that, at least in my opinion, I think our home page looks way cleaner and better, we need to address our layout for the database pages. So here we need to go to customize layout. Then we go to the property group and move it to the panel. Then you can click in this empty space. We can say we want to see inline comments as minimal. I always turn page discussions off. Property icons, I like to have them visible. And then we can also here change this to full width. You can also add database tabs. Here you can add tabs and where you can see linked database views. But in this case, for now, I want to apply the simple structure. Then you can also click in the heading. Here you can also say if you want to have property labels for properties that will show up here in the second. And for backlinks, I always like to show on hover. Then we can start pinning properties. In this case, I want to have the priority, the status, the due date, and the due date pinned. Here in the property group, we can also bring more structure in. We can add, for example, sections. One called standard properties for my assignee and one called background properties. Let's drag it under here for my created time and created by, because these are things that are being logged in the background, but I don't fill them out, so I can hide them in my background properties. Now let's get back to our structure and let's activate the tabbed view. And here we can now add another tab. Let's select our time database that we linked. And here we want to sort by status and then after that by start time. So back in the days, you used to add these linked views in the body. Now you have the option to create a new tab for a linked view of a database. Yes, there is one case where it makes sense to place that in the body, but in most of the use cases, you can simply place it into a new tab. But there will be a video about this on my channel coming out soon. I think it's the next video that will come out after this one. So if you want to learn more about this, subscribe to the channel to not miss this. So now what we can do in here is we can hide properties that we don't want to see. I, for example, don't want to see the relation. And I want to have the status as my first property. And now also here, I can shrink my properties to make every property easily visible. Now what we can do is we can say apply to all pages. And now we have this way cleaner layout applied to all our tasks. And that's it for this chapter. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite styling hack is to increase the aesthetic of your Notion workspace. But now let's move on to the next chapter. In this chapter, I want to show you how to use Notion more efficient, increase your skill level and understanding of Notion. The first thing I want to talk with you about are Notion pages. You can make pages as a favorite to access them faster. So you can go to the top right here and add this to your favorite. And what this will create is this will show up in your favorite section. So down here you have your private pages, and on top you have your favorites, where only pages appear that are getting marked with this star. The next thing is if you deleted a page or something in the page. What you can always do is you can press Command and Z if something happened in this moment, or what you can later do if you deleted a page, for example, you can go into the trash and restore deleted pages. What you can also do if you deleted something, so let's say I deleted something and I can't get it back with Command and Z, I can go up here to version history, and here I have my previous version, and now I could click restore to re-get this version of the page. Or what I can do is I can highlight this, press Command C, exit this, and press Command V to re-edit. If you want to avoid accidental changes to your page, like accidental deleting something, you can always lock a page, and then this can't happen. I can't delete anything here. So if you want to avoid that, you can lock a page. What you can also do is I could go in here and go to home manually, or I could create a link. So if I click this, I will instantly get to my home page. Then I can go in here to my backlink and go back. And now let me show you how to create that. You write plus and then the name of your page, in this case home, and you can select the right page. And now we created the same link that will get us to our home page. If you ever have a page that is not in your language, for example, this page is in Dutch and I don't know Dutch, so I don't have to copy the page content in a translator app or so and then get it back here. I can natively translate it in Notion. So click on translate, and then let's translate this in English. Now on my current plan, I ran out of Notion AI, but if you have unlimited access to Notion AI, you can press translate, then your language, and it will translate everything to your language in Notion. The next thing I want to talk with you about is the mentioning feature in Notion. You can access it by just typing add, and then you can either select a page, a name, or a date. So you could mention a person if you, for example, work with multiple people on a page or in a workspace. You could mention a date, which is pretty handy. If you have, for example, a journal database, you could write as the title add and then the date when the page gets duplicated. And the last thing that you can do is you can mention pages. It looks similar to linking to a page, but the difference is that this won't show up in your sidebar. The next thing I want to show you is everything about sharing and publishing a page. What you can, of course, do is you can invite people via their email address and then give them access. And for general access, you can change the options. I always keep it to only people that are invited. Here you can copy a link, which you can give people. And what you can do is you can also publish a page. And here it gets interesting. The first thing that you can do is you can get a custom domain. So as you can see, we have two parts here. Now on my free account, on my demo account, you can see this is a random string, a random name that is created. And after here you have the page. What you can do is you can get a custom domain to make this look way more professional. I will also get this for the links to my materials that I share on my demo account soon. The next thing that you can do is you can customize site styling. You can say, for example, if a person has this link and opens it, I always want to show this in light mode, in dark mode, or system, which will then apply this to the system settings of the person. So if a person has light mode enabled on their PC, it will be displayed in light and vice versa. The next thing you can do is you can change the icon as well as turn Google Analytics on. And you can, which is in my opinion the best one, you can manipulate the header over here. For example, I don't need everything up here, so I can customize it to my need. I can, for example, deactivate the breadcrumbs as well as the sharing option. What I can also do is I can deactivate the search icon, and by doing that, this looks way better than this, in my opinion. Way more tidy and organized. What you can also do is you can decide on search engine indexing. You can say, for example, I want this to be discoverable on the web or not. I always turn this off. You can say if a person is allowed to duplicate this or not. If you turn this on, people can make a copy of this page. By deactivating this, people can't duplicate this. Then you can manage all your site and links here. You can share it via social, for example, WhatsApp, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, or email. And you can even embed this page. So you will get a code snippet you can include wherever you want, and it will automatically include this page here. Now let's get to the shortcuts, because shortcuts can really speed up your workflow. Now what we can do is we can spawn different lists. We have a toggle list, a numbered list, a bullet list, as well as a to-do list. To create a toggle list, just write this bigger than followed by a space, and this will give you a toggle list. Let's write toggle list and close this off and go into the next block. Then what we can do is we can also spawn a numbered list. So just write 1 followed by a dot and a space, and this will create a numbered list. Now we can write numbered list, press enter, and now we can create the bullet list. This is even easier. You just write a minus and then a space, and this will create you a bullet list. So just write bullet list and enter, and now we want to create our last list style, which is a to-do list. To create a to-do list, just write these rectangle parentheses. I actually don't know the name at the moment, so just create one opening and one closed one, and then space, and this will give you a to-do list. Now what we can also do, as you can see, we can create hierarchies. We can just press the tab and then we will move in. We can also, then we can write to do, we can go in the next block, and then we can tab again to create a new hierarchy order. And this is possible for a to-do list, for a bullet list, and for a numbered list, but not really for a toggle list. Here what you can see, I can see the hierarchy. Here, yes, I can also place it in here. And the big thing about toggle list is that I can collapse them. So you can see I have a toggle list. In that I have a toggle list, and here I can open it. I can spawn another toggle list. Yes, I can leave it this way, but the main reason for a toggle is to hide things. There is also a shortcut. If you want to collapse a toggle list, you just press Command and Enter, and this will close the toggle. Another shortcut that is very handy is if you want to change something in line. For example, let's say I want to turn this into an H3. I could highlight everything and then change it into an H3 or whatever. But what I can do is I can press space, then slash into, and then H3. And if I then press enter, it will get changed to an H3 inline. The next trick is if you want to select everything, so everything on this page, you don't have to highlight everything. You can just press Command A and A again, and this will highlight everything with a shortcut. Another very useful shortcut is if you want to get the link of this page, you don't have to go up here and then copy the link. You can just press Command, Option, and L, and as you can see, we copied the link to our clipboard, and now we can paste it everywhere we want. So this is also a very big time saver. Also, a very nice shortcut is if you want, for example, to move this page somewhere else, we don't have to copy the page and then paste it somewhere else, we can just press Command, Shift and P. And now we have this menu, and from here, from this page, we can move it to any page we want. Another shortcut that I really like is if I want to search for a page, I can just press Command and K, and this will open my search in Notion. I could also open the same search menu in every other app. Let's say I am in my browser or in Premiere cutting this video. I can then add something to it. In this case, I would press Command, Shift and K, and this will give me the same menu. Now, the next shortcut I want to show you is if you want to duplicate a block, let's say, for example, this one, I don't need to go in here and say duplicate. I can just go in here and press Command D, and we will get another instance of this block. The following shortcuts now are everything about changing the appearance of the text. I showed you some of them in the first chapter of this video where we restyled a page to increase the aesthetic, and now I want to show you all the things you can do with text. Let's first select everything by pressing Command, Shift and the left arrow key, and then we can say, for example, Command I, which will turn this into an italic styling. Then what we can do is we can also press Command B, which will bold this. We can press Command U, which will underline it. Then what we can also do is we can strike through this. Just press Command, Shift and S to strike through this. Then what we can also do is we can press Command E, and this will change this into code, where we can also change the text color as well as the background color of our text. Now for text, there is no shortcut that will give you access to a specific color. The only thing you can do is you can press Command, Shift and H, and this will give you the last color applied. In this case, it's white, so there is no change. If I would have used blue as my last color, if I pressed Command, Shift and H, this text would turn into blue text. Now, the last two things I want to show you is how to turn this into an equation. In this case, press Command, Shift and E, and then Enter. And now you can see this is an equation. And the last shortcut I want to show you is how to turn this into a hyperlink. Just select everything and then press Command and K, and now I can add a page or a URL to it to link to it. Let's say, for example, this page, and now if I would click this, I would get directed to our test page. The last two things I want to show you in regard to shortcuts are how to create this divider as well as the headings. For the divider, just press minus, minus, and minus, and this will automatically create this divider. And for the headings, because we have 3 headings available in Notion, just press hashtag and then space for a heading 1, or press hashtag, hashtag, and then space for a heading 2, or as you might have guessed, hashtag, 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 followed by a space for a heading 3. So the next thing that we want to talk about are Notion tabs. These are these things that you can see on top of here, and you can switch between them. If you want to create a new tab, you don't have to click on the plus. You can just press Command and T, and then you can select a page you want. If you have a page at hand, for example, these pages here, you can just press Command and then click on the page, and the pages will get opened as new tabs instantly. What you can also do is you can press right click and then you can pin a tab. So this means that this tab will be here all the time. If I go, for example, in here and go to tab page, it will change to tab page. When I would now also pin this tab and this is pinned over here and I now click on tab page, a new tab will create it. So if you want to fix some tabs and don't want to change the page in here, you can just pin a tab and you can also unpin it every time. Then on top, what you can do is you can go down here and you can create tab groups. For example, I am in ungrouped tabs in here, but I have a tab for my daily tabs I have, and then I have a group for my important tabs and a sandbox, and the pages I have as tabs or even pinned tabs over here change from group to group. Now you can also create that and include any pages you want. The last thing in regard to tabs I want to show you is how to navigate the bar, because we can now say I want to have this and this or this, and I can click with my mouse in every single tab, but this is very inefficient. There is a faster way. You can press Command Option and then the arrow keys to navigate the tab bar, or if you want to be directed directly to, let's say for example, tab page 2, which is our fourth tab, we can press Command 4 and we will jump directly to it. And this is possible for the numbers 1 to 8. So if you have, for example, 10 tabs, Command and 9 will actually bring you to the last tab displayed over here. So Command and 1 will bring you to the first, Command 2 to the second, and then Command 8 to the 8th, and Command and 9 will bring you to the last tab, even it's like, for example, tab number 100. Command plus 9 will bring you to the last tab. That is something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about databases. And the first thing I want to show you in regard to databases is to never use inline databases. At least this is my opinion, because this view is also the database itself. So if I would delete this view, I would delete the database and every entry. Let's say we have two inline database. Let's go in here and press Command D to duplicate it. And now I have two database views, and these are two different databases. If I change this to test entry inline 2, this won't change here. What I could do so is I could create a full page database and then only create views of that database. So when I change something in the view, I will change it directly in the database. So in my opinion, don't use inline databases. The next thing that you can do is you can lock databases. So let's say you don't want that someone can change the name. You can just go into the settings and say lock database. So now if I click here, I can't change the name. So you can avoid accidental changes. Same to the page. Now let's talk about good manners and best practices for databases. Have at best one database for every type of database. For example, only have one task database instead of multiple different tasks databases across your workspace, so that all your tasks are in one database and not some tasks are in task database 1 and some are in task database 2, because that is a very inefficient way to work. Maybe you have different month databases, for example, in two different templates, because you want to get analytics, for example, for your habits and for your books. I think that is okay if you only want to have analytics in a template, but for things like tasks, which can be in your content database or in your normal OS template, definitely go for only one task database. I also did this mistake when I started out, so at the moment I try to combine everything in my workspace and make it neat and organized and as efficient as possible. So if I can make you avoid this mistake, only build one database for every purpose. Also have one backend where you store all your databases. For example, I have a view of a database and a view of another database, and all the full page databases are stored in here at one point. So I don't have database 1 at one location and database 2 at another. So, and I have to look for it every time. I have a backend at least on template level. So if you have, for example, a habit tracker template, at least store every database of that template in a backend. Or if you want to do it the best way, have all databases in one place of your whole workspace. This will help you to work way faster and way more efficient because you know where all your original databases are. And this is also something that is in relation to this here. This is a full page database. So we have a database as a full page, and this is a view of that database. If I delete that, no problem, we still have our database. And I could, for example, create another view besides this view. And if I would change something in the view, I don't change it actually here. I make the changes here and they apply to every view of that database. But that's something I quickly want to mention here. The next thing I want to tell you is to never create new views on a page. So don't go in here and create a new view from scratch. Go into the full page database and then create a view here. And then what you can do, you can go here and say full page database. And then as you can see, I have this available here. So also in addition to that, if I want to have the same view at different locations in a template or workspace, I avoid mistakes if I create one pattern in my full page database and then only select it when I want to place it on a page. So never create a view on a page, always in the database. The next thing I want to show you is something if you don't have another analytics database to, like for example, calculate something or count something, you can use calculate options. You can say, for example, I created this in here. Let me reverse this. You can go on a property and then you can say calculate. And what you can do there is, for example, yes, in this example, we can count it. It's 3 entries, but let's say the database is bigger. What we can do is we can count and then we have different options. You can play with this. In this case, I will go for all. And you can see, we can see this view has 3 entries, and this can be very convenient in some use cases. The next big thing I want to talk with you about are database templates. Database templates are these things that you can store in here. And what database templates allow you is you can pre-fill a template with something that you always need in the body. So you don't have to create a new entry and then create this from scratch. You create a template, and then when you add a task, you select the template and everything gets applied automatically. Let me show you what this looks like. Let me remember this. So we have a text, a view, and a database. And this is actually a very bad setup, but more to that in a second, why you should avoid that. What we can do is we can add a new full page, and now everything gets created automatically. I don't need to create this myself. Everything gets applied automatically. What you can also do in a database template is you can use dynamic data. I can say, for example, the day when I create an instance and use the template is always today. So again, if I create a new page, you can see that today's date is selected, which is also very convenient. If you only have one database template for a database, you can also always turn this into the default template. This is what the database already did. When I set this, for example, to the default template, and I now create a new entry, I can select between my templates. Let's say I have 5 different templates that I created, then I can pick between them. But if I only have one, I can always set it as the default template that gets applied every time I add something new to that database. Now let's talk about why this is a thing you should never do. What we do in here is we have a fresh, new, full-page database with a view of that database in a page. And every time that we create a new entry, we get a new database with a new view for every page. So we have a full-page database for this page that is not linked to the database in here and not in here. So for every entry, we have an own database, and this is not what we want. So instead of doing it in here, place the full page database outside here and only a view. So only the views will be displayed in here and the database is here. So we have one database that is outside and these entries only get a view instead of that every page has its own database and they are not linked. So never have a full page database in the body of a page. Always place it outside and only add a linked view of that database. Another thing that you can do is, because yes, sometimes it happens that you misclick and select the wrong template, just go in here, press Command A and A to select everything, then you can delete it, and again, then you can select the template that you intended to use. Now let's talk about other database features that I can only recommend to use. The first one is to use filters. Let's say you have 100 entries in that database and 50 of them have option 1 and 50 have option 2. If I filter this by saying, let's ignore this at the top here. If I say in this filter, I only want to see pages where select is option 1, I will only see entries in that view that have option 1. So I limit the pages I see in a view by filtering the database view. The next step you can add is advanced filters. I also added this in here. So you can add a normal filter and then you can add this to an advanced filter, which is in my opinion better. So here you can create more logic to filters. The logic you can add is and or. So you can say where X applies or Y applies to keep it simple, or you can say you want this and this to make an entry show up here. So in this case, I said I want to see entries where the start date is relative to today, this day. So the start date is today, and I say or the select is option 1. So both use cases can apply for a page to show up here. And you can get really creative here. You could say, for example, I want to turn this into a group. And now let's add this in here. We can say or select is option 1. And then we can say we want this here. So where the start date is relative to today, this day, and select is option 1, or something else. We could also turn this into a group and you could get really creative, but I don't want to dive that deep. The only thing I want to say is in a group, you can only use and or. So if I add another rule, I can only use and. I can't use an or here. For that, I need to create another group, and here I can add an or. But let's build this back. This looks way simpler, and this is everything we need for this demonstration. Another feature that is really nice is sorting. And what sorting does is, in comparison to filter limits the entries I can see. So if I have 100 and I filter by only select is option 1 and we have 50 entries with option 1, I can see 50. Let's say, for example, I filter and say option 1 and option 2 can be visible. What I can do with sorting then is I can sort. I can say, for example, I want to sort by select ascending. So all option 1 entries will be displayed above option 2. So I can bring more structure into it. So it doesn't happen that option 1 is under option 2. So I select that the sorting is by select ascending. What you can also do is you can apply more than one sorting criteria. For example, in this case, I said select ascending by select. So option 1 will show up above option 2. And then I can say select by date ascending. So August 31st is above September 1st. And if I would have another entry that is option 1, but September 2nd, it will show up under that. So I can sort databases the way I need them. The next thing that you can use is the group feature, which I applied in this case. So you can go in here and let me ungroup it for now. So this is the way it would normally show up. I have all my entries here that I filtered to show, and I sorted it in the right direction. Now what I have is I also have other properties. In this case, another select property, and I want to group by that. In this case, it's select 1. So I have the option type 1 and type 2 for my select 1. And what I did is I created separate groups to differentiate entries even more. So this entry of option 1 has the type 2. These two have type 1. If I would have them straight in a normal table view, it could be different. It could be more difficult to separate them. But this is a way better way to, yes, as it says, group entries by another property. And what I also don't have to do, which can avoid scrolling, is I don't need to display the type here as a property because I already grouped by it. And here in grouping, you can even more manipulate this. I can say, for example, I want to sort manual. I can say I want to sort alphabetical. I prefer manual. I can say I want to hide, for example, where there is no option selected. I can change the order of that, and I can also remove the grouping. I can say hide empty groups, and that's it in regard to grouping. Now everything in here looks, in my opinion, very clunky and way too filled. So what I can do if I hover next to my filter is I can see this two minimized arrows. And what this does is it will hide everything. So if I would now also hide the database title, this looks way more clean, and I can always expand it and minimize it again and access my settings by the 3 dots. The next thing that we can talk about is, let's say, just for the sake of this video, you want to change the icon of every property to the word. Now what you can do is you can go in here or in here and go to view details and go into all the different sections and change it. But in my opinion, this is way too complicated. What you can do is you can click on the 3 dots, go to edit properties, and here you have all your properties organized in a list, and you can apply changes way faster. Another small trick that is very handy is if you have a relation and you want to link entries to one another. In here, I could have another entry that says test entry full page 2, and I can't separate them. So what I can do is I can click on the 3 dots, and here I can turn on a property that can separate them in a way. So let's say the other one would have option 1. In this case, I can see, okay, this has option 2, so this is the right entry. And this is something I prefer to do, so I can always separate entries. Another property that can come very handy in here is a date. property. For example, if you have same entries but with a different date, you can make the date visible in here to select the right entry. The next trick is a trick you can use in the table view of databases. So the trick is you don't need to go all the way to the right, then click Add Property and drag it to the place you want. You can just, if you want to insert a property between this and this property, either right-click this and say Insert Right, or click here and select Insert Left to directly add a new property where you need it. Speaking of scrolling, what you can also do is you can freeze a column. Let's say, for example, I want to look up something up here and I forget which task is which. I could freeze this, and if I now scroll over, the property I freezed still remains. I can still see it. So now I can go in here and see, select 2, what are the options, and I can still see the name. What is not possible is freezing up, for example, the first property and then the third property and not this one, and to be able to see this and this freezed but not this one. What happens is Notion will automatically freeze the properties between there. So if you want to only freeze these two, for example, move the properties you want to freeze next to each other, and then you will only freeze them. Otherwise, Notion will freeze all the properties in between, which is something that you can already also use. Let's say you want to freeze up 3 properties. You can freeze up the first and the third, and Notion will do the rest for you. Another thing you can do is you can hide properties that you don't want to see in this view. Let's say, for example, I don't want to see the relation in here. I could go in here and select hide this property, and then I only see these 4 properties. Especially in this case, what I already did is I hid the select one property because I don't need to see it here. I know that in this group, all the entries have this option selected for select one. So I don't need to see select one for every entry here. So really think about what properties you want to have visible in a view and only show them. The next feature I want to talk with you about is conditional formatting, which is actually a relatively new feature. And what this does is, based on what you set it to do, it will color code an entry in a color. In this case, I color coded it by the select property. To show you this, I left this in. I could now also hide this because I know based on the coloring what select option we have. But I left it in to showcase it to you. And how we could add this is we can go to conditional color, and then let me remove this. Now we don't have a conditional formatting. We can click on plus new color setting, then select the property, and then we can say where select is not empty, for example, and then we can match the option. We can don't match the option and turn everything gray. And you can say where it is a specific option, for example, option 1, we could turn them green, and so much more. Let me make this is not empty and then match option. This is how it was before, but there is so much more possible. But just to let you know that this feature exists. If you ever deleted a database property and you want it back because you maybe accidentally deleted it, or you decided that you want to have it back. Now in this case, I deleted my date property accidentally. Now what I can do is I can click on the 3 dots and again go to edit properties, and down here I see I have my date property that I deleted. Now I could say yes, I want to delete it, or I can restore it, and now I get everything back and the right date. So I not only recover the date property, I also get my options that I selected back. The next thing I want to show you is a new view that Notion recently added to their possible layouts. Normally we had table, board, timeline, calendar, list, gallery. These are all views. I don't want to include charts because that's, in my opinion, a whole other story. These are views that can show you database properties like a select, a date, a checkbox, a button or so. Now we have a feed view that can actually show you what is in the body of a page. Remember our database template that we have? Now we can see for every page the name and what is in the body. We had this text, we had the link view, we had the database, which we talked about, which makes no sense. But for this, now you can see, we can see what is in the body in this view, which can be very convenient in some situations. The next thing is actually something I want to do from scratch with you together, and that is to let AI help you to get a first draft for your database. And that is actually very convenient for beginners and maybe even for more advanced users to get a first draft and let Notion do the heavy lift. And in that process of Notion AI building a first draft, we can even customize it, like accepting suggested properties for the database, or add my own, as well as getting views created or add views that it suggested. For now, at least at this time when I record this video, I can only create one database, so I can't create a construct of more than one database. But now let's try to recreate that over here. That is all created by AI. So go in here, write / full page database, and then click on build with AI. And here you can say what you want. In this case, I only want to track habits. Then I can submit this, and then Notion will start with the process of building a first draft. So you can see it added properties, now it is adding views, and now it's adding pages. And now we can see Notion added properties such as a frequency, a streak, a start date, and so on. And now we can say we want to also get other properties. It suggests to, for example, add a difficulty. Now we can add a difficulty to it. And we can even say that we want to have another property. Let's say, for example, we want a time of day property. Now we can add a time of date, and Notion will design the database. And now you can see Notion added a property for time of day, but it is hidden at the moment in here and I can't unhide it. And Notion even created a new view that says by time of day, and for language learning it applied afternoon as an option. Now we can say we want to share positive feedback because that is exactly what we needed. And now we can say continue. And here we have our views. Let's say, for example, I also want a calendar view. Now Notion will also add a view of a calendar type. Let's say streaks. I don't want to have this view. I can not click it, so Notion won't create it. And now I can click on done. And I have my first draft. Either use it this way, or you can also say, I want to build on this and further manipulate this. But I think especially for beginners, this is a very cool way to get your first draft of a database. Now, let's move on to the so-called advanced features. The first features I would suggest to use are automations and buttons, because these features allow you to shortcut workflows. Let's take, for example, time tracking. I could manually set something to done and then log the completion time manually, or I have an automation that does this automatically. So what I built for this is I built an automation, and the automation is if the status is set to complete, we want to set the completion time to time triggered. Let's ignore this for now. I will get to this in a second. So what happens if I now set something to done? Notion will automatically log the completion time. And this is just a very simple automation you can build. There is so much more complex stuff that you can do with automations, even across different databases. So not limited to one. Same for buttons, and same goes for buttons. What you could also do, speaking of buttons, is you could also create a button property and configure the button property that it sets the status to done and logs the completion time. That is also possible. What we can also do is we could configure a button that sets every task that is in progress in this view or database to done. This is also possible. And for your information, automations is a paid feature, so you need to be on a paid plan to use it. And buttons, these buttons as well as the database property buttons are free features. But the thing with automations are, in comparison to charts I want to talk about in a second, are that if you duplicate a template from someone who included automations, you can use them, but you can't edit them. So you can use the automations someone built for you, but you can't create new ones or change them. One quick use case for the button property I want to show you is you can add a home button. Because what this button does is it will open our home page that I showed you in chapter 1 in a full page. So let's say I want to go to my home page. We could do this with a link to page, but we can also do it because it looks nice with a home button. And now I am in my home view, which is pretty cool. Another feature of automations that is only available for automations, and it also makes sense, is the recurring option. And this is something I created here. I said, please create a new entry every day to that database, to the tasks chapter 2 database, and give it the name of the date triggered and select me as the person. And you can see here, it created a page on August 28, on August 29, August 30, August 31. So you can avoid adding an entry every single day by getting an automation that adds a new entry every single day. This is the same that we have here for templates. You can also, when we, for example, let me create a test template, I could also say repeat this, and then I can say every day. This feature is also available in automations in a way better way. So this automation, as I said, will add a new entry every single day. And here you can even add complex logic to it. Now let's get to something that I didn't tell you at the start, and this is triggers. You have different options. You don't only have to go for one trigger. For example, in this case, I say both of them can apply independent. So either this trigger applies or this trigger applies. So as I already showed you, if I set this to complete, Notion will log a completion time. Now I said if any of this happens, so I can also clear me as the person, and this will trigger the same automation. Let's wait for a second. And here you can see it. So let me re-add me really fast. And so you can see if any of them applies. What I can also do is I can say I want all triggers to apply. So now I need to set it to complete and I need to clear the person. So this is just for the sake of this video. This doesn't make sense at all, but I want to show you the functionality. Now I need to set it to complete, to the option done. Nothing happens because I say this and this need to apply. And once I also clear my name, you can see we get a completion time. So that is everything in regard to triggers. And here you can get really creative with triggers. If you ever have the feeling that you don't want to have an automation anymore, or that you don't need it, or it's not working and you don't want to get it applied, if you test something, you don't have to delete it. You can just go in here on the three dots and say put it to not active, and now it's paused. So now if I would, for example, set this to done, we won't get a completion time because this is paused. And now if I later decide I really don't need it anymore, I could delete it, or I could then turn it to active again and use it. So I don't have to delete it and then build it from scratch. The next feature I can only suggest to use is Notion charts, because sometimes Notion charts can show you data in a way better way than any other normal view could. So I can see, for example, I have one task in progress, one on hold, and one done. Now, because I don't have that many entries, it's pretty easy to see, but let's say that I have more, then it wouldn't be that easy. What I also did is I can filter here. So I filtered. So let's say, for example, now I have 4 tasks where I don't have a select option. Now, if I remove myself, I will get 3, because this is filtered by only showing tasks that are related to me as a person. If I re-edit, I will see 4 again. And as I showed you here really quick, if you want to see what data is behind this, you can click here to view the data, and then you will see a database. And here I can see I have one task that has option 4 selected and not started, 2 tasks that are option 3 in the select property, and I have 4 that have no select. So you can always see of what data a chart is made of by clicking on to click to view data. So Notion charts are a very powerful feature that I can only recommend to use to show data in another way or to get analytics in the best way possible. But remember, charts are a paid feature and different to automations. A free plan is limited to 1 chart, so you can only see 1 chart across your whole workspace. Another very powerful feature is Notion forms to gather information. So you don't have to collect information and then retype it into your Notion database. You can get data directly from a form in your database. Let's say, for example, let me type form entry as the name and select option 1. If I now submit this, I could now see it here. I see form entry and select option 1. So I got my data directly from forms into my database, which could be beneficial in companies if you want to get opinions on something, or if you want to collect data from viewers or whatever. Notion forms is a very powerful feature. What also comes in very handy is to use progress bars, because I can relate, for example, tasks to a project. Now it's very easy to see how many tasks are done, but let's say I have 50 tasks. It's way more difficult. So I could create a progress bar to see how many tasks are done. So now this project is half done because I have 1 out of 2 tasks that are done and 1 that is not done. And this formula is reactive. So if I would now turn this to done, you would see it change to 100. And what this formula is looking like is it filters all my tasks that are done and divides it by the total number of tasks. And then I go in here and say, I want to see this in %, and I want to see this as a progress bar. And this is way better to see than this here. And the newest feature that you can use that Notion added by the time I record and script this video is Notion's offline mode. And as the name emphasizes, you can now use pages that are downloaded offline. So you can go to the 3 dots here of every page and you can say, available offline. So this will download this page and make it available offline, so when you have no internet connection. And on a paid Notion plan, you have also the option to let Notion download pages for you. So Notion sees, for example, you use a specific page very often, but you haven't downloaded it manually, then Notion will automatically download it for you, which is a very smart way. So if you need pages available, Notion's offline feature is a very powerful feature to consider using. But keep in mind that is a very fresh feature and there are some limitations. So if you want to know the limitations, watch my video on offline mode that I published on this channel. And these tips are also not limited to Notion. You can save a lot of time by using an extension called Save to Notion. This extension can save things from your browser directly to Notion without you opening Notion and copy pasting everything, which is, in my opinion, a game changer. If you want to know how that works, watch this video over here. Stay consistent. See you next.